sponsoring her class on negotiation. She began her legal career doing mergers and acquisitions at Jones Day in New York. She has held a variety of general counsel or deputy general counsel jobs, as well as having her own law firm. She is currently assistant general counsel at a company called Upside. We are absolutely thrilled to have her here talking about negotiation, both to our business law colloquium class with students from the Case Western Law School, as well as lawyers from the Cleveland area. So with that, I am going to turn over the class to Pantea Stevenson, and I'm going to let her take it from there. We're going to have an interactive class, as you can see from the handouts that you have in your possession.
Hey everybody, can you hear me without the microphone? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna move around. I'm fidgety. Very nice to meet you. Our class, I just want to take a second and note how lucky you all are to be at Case Western. I had the benefit of being here, and it has helped me throughout my career. The quality of the professors, how much they care about students is unmatched. And you can take my word because I did spend a year at a very highly rated law school. It was great. I'm not going to name names, but I felt like Case Western was just a great place to learn and a wonderful home to students. So thank you for having me, and you're all very lucky. How would we do the changes? Do I click this button?
You can signal to me, or you can control it up front at the keyboard with the right arrow key. Send you forward.
All right. And by the way, the intent of this is to be a collaborative class. Ask questions, add your comments, add your thoughts as we go along. This is going to be one of the more interactive classes that you take, and I think they're more fun that way. And it's about negotiations. There's no right way or wrong way of doing it. So I'm going to start with the premise that negotiations are ubiquitous in life. You're doing it all the time. From friends or family deciding on where to go to vacation, to, I have kids, asking for something, or 10 more minutes, to students asking for help, or students asking for an extension, to people coming to legal. I'm in-house counsel at Upside. People coming in saying, can't legal just approve this just this once? I know there's a process here, but can we just do this once? It's really important. Two, this presentation. Right now, I'm going to, we walk a fine line with each other. We're constantly giving and taking as social creatures. And we're trying to convince each other all the time for things and wants. And one of the things I'm going to try to do with the next slide is convince you why you should listen to me. And you'll see this in every preface of a book, in every presentation, which is, I'm going to tell you why you should listen to me, because I have over 15 years of experience doing nothing but contracts. I'm currently Deputy General Counsel at Upside, which is a tech unicorn. Does anybody know what a tech unicorn is?
Company that's market cap or worth is over $1 billion.
Yes. So we've been very lucky. It's been really fun. Hopefully big things will happen in the years to come, but I was also a Case Western alum class of 2008. It has been a long time. If we can, I want to make one other note. Most of the times when I've negotiated during my career, I've taken the underdog position. So I'm there negotiating against Goldman Sachs, against McDonald's, against ExxonMobil, against BP. That's a fun position for me to take. I don't have the leverage. That's where I have to be creative. If you're in-house counsel at a big company, they're going to tell you, this is what you go and you tell our vendors. And if our vendors want to deviate, really tough. But if they really want to deviate, you have to go through this approval process. To me, that's not fun. I like being the vendor that makes them go through the approval process and win the points, or come to a solution. So usually when I'm negotiating, I don't have the leverage. But that's what makes it fun for me. There you have to be more creative. You have to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And it's really, really fun when you make multi-billion-dollar companies blink. To me, that's way more fun than going from top and being like, you must accept this, because most vendors do. All right, so moving on, I want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this presentation. I haven't come across a really great resource for negotiations. I find a lot of them are older, and I think today's workplaces have changed. Things are a lot nicer and cuddlier, not just because I'm in-house, but because times have changed. So what may have worked and how people conducted themselves when I first started practicing, it's different. The other part of it is when you read a lot of these books, a lot of them are focused on one-size-fits-all solutions. A lot of times people are saying things like, look at me, I'm successful, I did it this way, you should do it. I don't think that's how negotiations work. There are so many different ways to negotiate, and if there's one thing you take from this class, I hope it's that. It's you can be yourself, however you want to be. You can be a jerk. You can sit there and yell and scream, or you can be collaborative, you can be funny, you can be everything in the middle, and you can be successful at negotiating. I'm going to advise against the jerk thing because we're social creatures and people remember, you may win one war or one battle, but you're going to lose the war. The legal community is incredibly small. You're going to see other people. The business community is actually surprisingly small when you figure out your industry too. You're going to develop a reputation. So while you may win once or twice, you're not going to win the third time because people don't like getting poked in the eye. They start poking you back. All right. The other part of it is I've seen a lot of techniques that focus on manipulation. And the same thing applies to that. Manipulate someone a couple times, you're not going to be back for more. You're not going to be very successful. You're going to develop a reputation. I don't think that's a fun way to do business. I think you can convince people without trying to use psychological tricks on them, manipulating them. One of the major books on negotiation was written by someone with an FBI hostage negotiator. Excellent book, but parts of it doesn't apply to lawyers. We're not talking to crazy people on the other side. We're talking to people who are going to pick up if you're manipulating them. So the purpose of this negotiation is to get you comfortable. It's to provide you with a mindset when you go in to negotiate. And then the second part, I think the mindset is much more important. The second part of this, we're going to talk about some tactics. And tactics you can take or give, and you can break them. I break my own rules all the time because that's what the time called for. But I think the most important thing you can do is start getting yourself comfortable when you're negotiating. When I first started in law, every single time I was negotiating, I would get really nervous. And I've had colleagues tell me, oh my God, you look so calm. When everything was happening, you look so calm. I was like, you're not seeing what I'm feeling inside. I could come off as calm, but inside my heart rate's going, I'm very uncomfortable. And we'll go into some of the reasons why later. But I think you can do a lot of this while being yourself, while being a decent person, and be incredibly effective at negotiating. So right now, I'm still negotiating with you. I'm negotiating with you and why you should listen to me and why this presentation is important. So with that, let's move on to our agenda. There it is. So generally speaking, like I said, we're going to start talking about the mindset of negotiations, how to think about them, and then we're going to go into tactics. In the middle of it, we're going to have multiple interactive negotiations. And one of the negotiations we're actually going to do twice. We're going to do it in the beginning, before we kind of get into everything. And then we're gonna do it again after we get better at this. And just see how the results change. And see what we may have missed, or frankly, what we were able to win because the other side missed, or things we're missing or taking. So one of the things you're gonna do in this presentation is you're gonna pair up once. We're gonna do a pretty quick negotiation, see about where we end up, and then I want you to pair up with someone different. And then we'll do it again at the end of the class. So hopefully that'll be fun, and we'll write down our results. You have your handout, and we'll see how they're different. All right. So I want to talk about a time. This would be exercise 1 in your. This would be exercise 1 on the sheet of paper, which is think about a time when. Everybody has. Okay. I'll put them. Think about a time when you were able to negotiate. Negotiation is essentially convincing. Where you were able to convince someone of your viewpoint, even if you didn't have leverage on them. So I want you to think about how you were able to do it, how you changed someone's mind. Big, small. How did you do it? And I want you to write it down, and then we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards. Think about a scenario where you were able to change someone's mind or negotiate, and you were really successful and you're proud of yourself.
Are we pairing up with it?
Not this one.
Okay.
In the sheet, it says it provides instructions on when to pair up.
Okay.
We'll do that one. So just take a few minutes and think about a time.
So, if I could ask a question. So, you're talking about situations where you think you get the other side to change. How do you deal with situations where the other side absolutely will never change, no matter what tactic you try?
I think we can. I'm in business. You sometimes walk away from the deal. It's rare. It's incredibly rare. I think there's a huge difference between business and personal and politics, for example. So we can focus on that. Let's talk about that after class, if that's okay. All right, who has a really good example when they change someone's mind? Or they won a negotiation? Socratic method. You ask questions. You ask open-ended questions.
Well, that's a good way to negotiate, I think.
Give us an example if that's okay with you.
Well, I'll just, since I opened my mouth here, I'll use the example. I'm desperately trying to retire now. I have been for a long time because I'm long in the tooth. But in 2000, I negotiated sort of a first of its kind military family housing privatization project with the United States Army, and I represented the apartment company, a large publicly traded apartment company that was selected as a developer. And there was culture clash like never before. But what made me successful was convincing the Army representatives that this private partner was going to bring value to the table and improve the lives of the service members and their families, so that the compensation that we were asking for and the equity stake that we were asking for was more than worth it to the government.
So you framed it as a positive, as a gain.
Well, in my view, the best way to negotiate is to result in a win-win. That's why the practice of business law is such a wonderful thing.
Yes. So one of the crux of what I'm trying to get to when I ask this is no one did it by being this guy. No one did it by going and smashing and burning and yelling. You didn't convince anybody. You may have won your point at that particular time, but no one did that. You weren't manipulating. You were explaining. You explained why they should take your position. And there are too many people, including too many lawyers, including litigators in particular, who think this is how you win. You don't. You create animosity, you end up wasting your client's time because you created animosity, and each side is dug in now. Every time you've been able to convince, I will assure you of this, every single time you've been able to convince someone to do something when you haven't had leverage, it's been when you convince them. It has come from reasonable explanations, talking back and forth, and that's how you got to the place that you needed to be. So with that, I'm going to turn to the next page, which is the benefits of being you during a negotiation. So I have read a bunch of negotiations books that say you should act like this, you should act like that, you should do. No, you can be yourself, be comfortable. Negotiations are a really stressful time because people want to be liked. So you just want to get it over with. Even when if you're asking for a raise, it's really difficult. You want to be liked. If you're asking for a discount on a car, you just kind of want to give and get out of there. Most people do. So negotiations can be stressful. Some people live for this stuff, but for us mortals, negotiations can be pretty stressful. So if you're on top of that, playing a caricature of, hey, what does a good negotiator look like, and let me act like that, you're adding stress to yourself. And the reason it's really important to not add stress to yourself when you're negotiating is listening, the ability to assess, improvise are some of the keys in negotiation. So if you're busy creating this caricature and acting in a way that you're not comfortable acting, you're missing all the cues. You're missing how you can be, you're missing listening to the other person. There is research after research out there that some of the best negotiators are really good listeners. So if you're caught up in yourself, you're not taking in everything that needs to be brought in. The other part of negotiations is problem solving. So again, if you've added an additional stressor, your mind is not in problem solving. Your mind is in, all right, what would the stereotypical negotiator do? They would do this now, or they would do that now. No, just be yourself. There are many ways to get to Rome. There are many ways to negotiate. The other part of it is some of the most effective negotiations I've been able to do have just been built on trust. We had a very major client at my last company that 3 lawyers before me were not able to sign them into a deal. Every time we negotiated with them, things would fall apart in legal, which is the worst place you ever want it to be. You never want business blaming legal for a deal falling apart. And the way it worked is I just showed up. The first time, it's just myself and the salesperson against 10 people. They're a multi-billion-dollar company on the other side. And they almost belittled me because they were just tired of us. Who is this vendor who keeps coming back? I just stayed in, I cracked some jokes. Then the next time we showed up, this deal took 5 months. And a lot of it was just us showing up and then they were fighting in the middle amongst teams themselves. But I just showed up, I built trust. When something wasn't fair and they mentioned it wasn't fair, I said, you're right, that's not fair, we'll change that for you. Sometimes I had to stop their infighting with jokes, but I slowly developed a relationship with them, and we were able to close a deal. And because we closed the deal, we got tens of millions of purchases from them in the years to come. Actually, in the next year. Building trust, building connections are really important, and they apply in negotiations. When I had my own firm, I actually got a lot of job offers from law firms that I negotiated against. They would call me and say, hey, Pantea, do you want to join my firm now? And it's because I formed connections with people. And then the next time when we had to negotiate, we were able to get it done faster. We were able to get to the points better, faster, and do what's best in our client's interest. And then when you're not stressed, you can focus on your goals and your principles. What are you trying to accomplish? You're not sitting there negotiating. As business lawyers, we're not sitting there negotiating for ourselves or for our health. We're negotiating for other people, which in turn leads to better results. And we're back at our circle of reduce anxiety. So I have some simple rules when I negotiate, which is I come on calm, I act like a decent human being because that's who I want to be. I don't make arguments I don't believe in. I actually had an adjunct professor stand right here and say, I never make arguments I don't believe in, and it stuck with me. I never make arguments I don't believe in. Because I find that when you're called out on it, you've lost trust. So if I have to take a position that I don't love, I find an argument I believe in, and I lead with that. And I have some side arguments too, but I'm not here to belittle people's intelligence. I'm here to build trust. I'm here to get a deal done. The other thing that flows off of that is I don't make arguments that don't persuade me. If I'm not persuaded by the argument I'm going to make, why would I think someone else is dumber than me and they would be persuaded by that? So treating people well has gotten me a long way. But that being said, that doesn't mean I'm not above certain things. So there are parts of yourself that you can lean in when you're negotiating. There are many sides of you. So my favorite way to negotiate is I almost take the judge position, almost an academic. And in that way, I take control. I love taking control of negotiations and just being like very explanatory. Oh, this provision is here, and sometimes I say because the law is this, and I always make sure I explain in a way that everybody in the room can understand. We'll talk about this in one of the future slides. I negotiate with business teams. My audience is not the other lawyer. Lawyers don't make or break deals in business. It's the business people that push it. So I'm trying to convince the lawyer. I'm not trying to convince the lawyer. I'm trying to convince the business people. So I always speak in easy to understand terms. I frame things in fairness and business terms. So that's the favorite position I like to take. But there have been more than one call where I've come on, and I have been very direct, very no nonsense, and but in those situations, I've had to take that position to be effective. But that's another part of me. I could be very direct. I could be no nonsense. I could call out unfairness very directly, and it's very effective. It's just I don't like taking that position, so I don't do it often. And then there's another side of me that's collaborative, friendly, curious, very problem-solving. That's another place where I like to be. And then there is the very happy warrior. I've done that too. That's where I like to be. That's where I'm happiest. I do lean into different parts of me depending on what the situation is. I assess it. I look at the people. What's funny is I've been doing this so long that sometimes I'll walk into a room and I'll look at no one walks into a room anymore. The Zoom call. And I'll just assess the situation. I know exactly what's going on. I'll be like, all right, this is where the deal's going to end up. This is what we're going to give. This is what we're going to take. And then we leave, and that's exactly what we get. And then people in the room are like, how do we do that? Like parts that I don't even negotiate because I've done it so many times. I have a sense for people. So I know which part of me I need to bring out. It gets a lot fun. It gets a lot more fun the more you do it. It takes a while to get used to it. So with that, I talked about some of the principles and things that I rely on. I want you to think about some qualities that you have. What are 3 qualities or principles that you can rely on when things are tough? Like, what's your core value? So one of my core values is integrity. Is building trust, right? Being calm, right? What are some things that are unique to you that you can rely on in times that are difficult? Anybody have something they want to share? Yes.
I guess something that I would do in that situation is just stop talking if I'm talking and just listen. If I'm feeling stressed, just better understand what's going on so I can reply more effectively.
That's a very good position to take. One of the most effective things you can do is quiet down, listen, and then say, let me repeat that to you. This is your concern, right? And by the way, when I do that, when you're negotiating against me, I'm coming after you because I figured out exactly what your concern is, and if you say, and I'm going to give you only what you said your concern was, and then take everything else. But that's we'll talk about that too, but listening is one of the most effective things you can do. Silence, quieting down, just listening and understanding. Anybody else?
I'd say being absolutely prepared ahead of the negotiations.
Man of my heart, yes. That's actually our next slide. How about yourself?
Oh, I was gonna say sometimes I think it helps to like de-escalate the situation or the stress by providing like some little bit of humor or like real conversation. So I find that I do that a lot.
That is a very effective technique. So and it's not even a technique, it's just being human. In the beginning of the Zoom calls, I don't like being the last one in. Lawyers have a reputation for being the last one on. I like coming on early, and then you make small talk. You find out what they're into. I could share this. So, fun fact, I was negotiating against Ticketmaster one day, and it was one of their subsidiaries, so I hadn't put two and two together. So we get on a call, and the person starts asking me, have you been to any concerts lately? Like, where? And this was when the Taylor Swift and all those things were just going crazy. And as we're talking, I wasn't putting two and two together. She's like, oh, those are great concerts. You know, we always have tickets on the side. And if you ever need them, right before everybody else jumped out, if you ever need something, you just reach out to me. So she was doing it back to me. Little does she know we're lawyers, we can't do things like that. But it was actually a little bribey, but with the small talk, she figured out what I wanted. She figured out it was these tickets, and then she made a gesture at me, which was a nice gesture that I was very suspicious of, but it was a nice gesture nonetheless. It was very interesting. All right, so let's get into one of the most, if there's nothing, well, I've said this already once, but this is really done one thing. The most important thing you can do before negotiation is prepare. I can't tell you how many points I've won because the other side has come in unprepared. And let me tell you some of the things that I'm looking for. I'm looking at what's the main goal here? What are we trying to get? So usually I have a client, right? What's my client trying to get? I get them on the phone. What is it you're buying? Or what is it that we want? Where do we want to land? What's a good outcome? What's a great outcome? What's something you'll live with? What are your non-negotiables? Things like that. And let me give you examples of some of these. If I have seen too many lawyers. My product, the product we sell right now is a SaaS product, but it's a unique SaaS product. It's not like a normal SaaS product. I have seen so many lawyers mark our agreement up like it's a typical SaaS product. And it just wastes time. And they didn't even take 5 seconds to understand it. Like, why do we think we know more than the business people? Why do we think we won't take 5 minutes to talk to our counterparts, to our clients, and figure out what it is that they're buying? Not only do I figure this out, not only do I call them and say, what are you buying? I also ask them, what are you afraid of? What could go wrong? I want to hear it from them. They're the experts. Not everybody's good at verbalizing them, but some of them are. Oh, what could go wrong is they could go down. If they're down, we're screwed. So we can't have any downtime. Okay, great. I'm going to negotiate a higher end service level agreement. Or the professional services that they're doing for us may not work, which then makes the software we're buying useless. Oh, cool. Now I'm going to draft the professional services agreement differently. And I'm going to say after the professional services are delivered to me, we're going to do an acceptance and testing before we have to pay for the software. Cool. Now I know that I've protected my company. And then the other thing is, like, what are the non-negotiables? I was just negotiating on one of my, we had a vendor that screwed up, and they're supposed to give us some money back. Well, the vendor comes to me and says, I'll give you double the money you want back, but you need to stay with us for an extra year. When I went to talk to my team, they said, non-negotiable, we never want to deal with them again. We don't care. We'll burn it down. We don't want to deal with them again. So, but they're your client, right? The other thing that's really important is who are you negotiating against? I think that's one of the most important things too. Like, am I negotiating against a very experienced attorney, and am I negotiating against a less experienced attorney? Am I negotiating against a real estate attorney on a SaaS contract, which I've done? Which means I look everybody up. If you're gonna be on a call with me, I've looked you up. I make sure I'm prepared. I see if I have any connections with you, because if we have any personal connections with each other, guess what? In the beginning of the call, I'm bringing it up. I'm saying, oh yeah, do you know Tom? Yeah, Tom and I went to law school together. Now we have a connection, we've built some trust. What's market? Now that's hard as a young attorney to figure out what's market. That's actually one of the hardest things you can do. Thankfully, actually, AI might be able to help you with that. There are certain things AI is good for, certain things it is absolutely not good for. But understanding what market is, like I negotiate a lot of SaaS agreements, so software as a service agreement. Because I've done these for the past, God knows how many, like 10 years, I know that if you do a liability cap, and I may be speaking foreign with you, but just stay with me. The liability cap, if you do a super cap, which is like, should there be a data breach, how much do you owe me? Do you all know what a liability cap is in a contract? Yes? Anybody want me to just, so a liability cap in a contract is, if you're entering a business deal, if someone's paying you $1,000, you don't want to be liable for $1 million, right? So what you do, and it's very common in tech agreements, you say, if you're spending $1,000 with us, the most you can come after us for, absent, to the fullest extent allowable under applicable law, is $1,000, right? So you cap your liability, because it doesn't make sense to sell something for $1,000 and have $1 million, $2 million worth of liability in the business world. So I know in a SaaS agreement, people usually come out to between 3x and 5x, which is 3 times the 1,000 or 5 times the 1,000 for liability caps. So I know what the market is. If I go in, I just had someone ask us for 50x, and I was like, really? And then they're like, okay. So I know what it is. I might come in high. I might come in, at 10x, or I might, but I know what the market is. Or let's say you're buying professional services. We just had this happen. We bought an outside vendor who reviews contracts for us. They told me they do value pricing. I was like, really? What's value pricing? So they're like, no, we don't do by hour, we do value pricing. I was like, all right, so how much is your fee? Because I was trying to talk. I normally don't negotiate price at my company, but I was just annoyed, so I was like, I'm going to negotiate this down. No one else is doing it, I'm going to do it. All right, cool. How many hours do you take per contract? They said, on average, we take, 12 hours on contract. So I was like, how many contracts have we given you? He said this. I said, okay, so you're trying to charge us $1,500 an hour per contract? So I did the math. I spit it back at them. Sometimes you have to do math. We got it down to 300, right? It's still not great, but they do some other analytical stuff that we were buying, and I was like, all right, that's better. But using market, using common sense, oh, someone else is selling it for $10, why are you selling it for $50? They may have a reason. You listen. But knowing what the market is, doing research on it, and sometimes that requires some searching, sometimes it requires you to look at the competitors and what they're doing. There's been times where I've had a contract that's been really one-sided, and I went and I pulled up their competitors' contracts, and I said, well, Salesforce doesn't ask for this. Salesforce doesn't need to grab my IP. Why are you grabbing my IP? Oh, look, Slack doesn't steal my IP. Why are you trying to steal my IP here? It's very effective, and you leave it to them to explain, right? So do your research. Be the most prepared person in the room. Try to understand what the industry wants. And then another thing that I did as a young attorney, and I still do, is I write down my arguments, and I think about the counter arguments, and I write them down. I used to have notes going into calls. And I'm gonna give all the law students here an exam tip. I don't know how many of you do it, I'm curious. But when I was in law school, I figured out that for most classes, there were really like 5 to 10 types of questions that professors could ask on an exam. So I would write my introductory paragraph for all of them. I would have it written, ready to go, so then I wouldn't be as nervous. All right, I got the first part down. Oh, you're asking about in constitutional law, remember I did it like for all the things. You're asking about the establishment clause or something. Okay, this is how I would start the answer. It's the same thing. Prepare. When you're young, you need to prepare more. I worked myself to the bone when I was young. It sucked, but I paid the dividends are paying off now. You need to write things down. Things take a little bit more longer as you're learning, and then you get better at it. I don't go into meetings with notes anymore. Sometimes I do actually, but also think about the counter arguments and your arguments to that. It's going to make you a better lawyer. All right. So we're going to do a baseline exercise, and like I said, we're going to repeat this again. We have a situation, and this is the one where you partner up, please. Or we have a situation where I have a Pantea Inc. has a contract and for a SaaS security tool. And the contract contains an auto renewal clause. It says, unless you terminate this agreement with 30 days prior written notice, this agreement auto renewals for successive 1-year terms. And the contract is for $500,000. Professor K's company letting me know, so it's only 10 days before the renewal date now, so they're late by 20 days. They haven't been happy with my security tool, and they've expressed their dissatisfaction multiple times. But on our side, a contract's a contract, right? And I've already prepared for this contract. There's this misconception that SaaS doesn't cost anything. Nope, I've hired an account manager for their account. We've been tooling, we've bought space, we bought computing. We've already done work for this contract. So the point of this negotiation, and this one's not going to be as long. I think I wrote 10 minutes, but we might. This one's not necessarily to come up with the perfect answer. I just want you to sit with a person. One side takes my side, one takes Professor Kostrisky's side, and just see where you come out. Does that work? Any questions? You don't have to be perfect in this one. Part of the reason we're doing this is so you see how it feels different as we continue through this class. All right, let's go. 10 minutes. I'm sorry to all the lawyers.
I'm gonna say,
Did anybody reach a resolution? No? You guys reached a resolution? Did you do, what, you don't have to tell me the amount, but like, was it a buyout? What was your resolution?
Something along those lines. So I'll just say the amount we agreed. I represented Prof K Inc. So
Yes.
I agreed. Oh, the other one. Sorry. So I represented the other company, and I agreed to let Prof K Inc. out of the contract for $350, and then we would both agree not to bring any lawsuits against each other. Just
Got it.
Drop it.
Anybody else have a resolution? Yes.
we agreed to a higher number of 450 based on inquired what were their fixed costs that they sunk into it, and I said we'll take care of that.
Okay. What else?
Because basically, the professor missed the timeliness of the contract, so the professor stuck with the 500 unless the professor could get something less.
What about, I would have, it's funny because I would have taken a much more aggressive posture on, as Professor K, because I'm in business law. Okay, you want to sue your customers? Come sue me. You want to spend $200,000 suing for $500,000? Cool, come. Now, but it's interesting where other people end up, right? One of the things I want to do now with this exercise is I want us to go through what questions would we have asked. I purposely worded this way. The numbers are purposely in amount. There have been times where I've been in a contractual dispute over $50K, and I've said, okay, sue me. Is another business really going to sue me for $50,000 and spend $150,000 suing me? I'm not being, you have to kind of think about the market and what's going on. So I purposely wrote it as 500K. 500K is a good number. Most people don't walk away from that, right? So I want to ask you all, what information would you ask for going into this negotiations? And as I reveal some of the information, I want you to think about how it would change how you would have ended up. So what's a piece of information? Yes?
This is one thing, facts that we immediately started adding to this scenario was whether or not we had other contracts with this vendor, and if this service, like this SaaS security tool, was the only software that they offered.
That is a great question to ask. This is the only vendor, but if you have more contracts with them, as Professor K, you want to tick me off less, right? Yes.
So representing Prof K's company, I asked how much did Pantea Inc. company spend for, for planning for the next year's contracts.
Yes.
Renewal.
And you know what? That's a really good time to have some market research, right? Like, well, you say you have an AM. I know for a fact that you don't pay them $350, right? And you can get rid of them. You can reassign them. At some point, you have a duty to mitigate, right? Okay, so the amount, I made a showing of saying it was high. In SaaS, it's actually, like, you can mitigate it, and you have a duty to mitigate, right? So it's not that high. But I purposely want to keep that figure vague, but there is some loss, but it's not that high. Of course, if I'm on one side, I'm going to be hammering you with it. On my side, I'm going to be hammering you with it, but there is some cost. Actually, let's just say it's about 50 to 100, but I could mitigate it down to 50. All right. What are some other questions you all have? Yes.
About some of the facts of the case, did Pantea breach in the first place? They breached the contract first by not dealing with the complaints about outages.
All right. So before I would walk into this negotiation, this has happened to me many times. People come and they're like, Pantea, I have this problem. All right, give me the contract. What's in the contract, right? What if I told you there's an attorney's fees provision for non-payment? Oh, well, now things look better for me, right? But what if I told you there's a warranty for professionalism and delivery, and we can make the case? So how many times is it missed? You pull your business partners. You ask them questions. Hey, how many times did they miss performance? Do you have it documented? How bad, right? So then when I go into negotiations, I'm citing facts. I'm taking emotion out of it, I'm citing facts. It seems like on 210, we were running a big event, internal event, and we had people visiting from all over, and your software went down. People couldn't log in, and our security systems were malfunctioning. What's going on? And look, it happened again. Is there a pattern of non-performance, right? Or is there, I love when my team gives me 3-4 examples. If it's just one, I'm like, all right, I'll go fight with this. But if they're giving me 3, 4, 5, oh, this is great. I'm gonna go beat them up, right? Knowing the facts, pulling the people on the ground. I spent, like, we had that vendor situation that I was telling you about where we're trying to get out of the contract. I spent 2 different calls with our internal team saying, show me how they messed up. Oh, we have pictures? Oh, I'm gonna put them in my demand letter. There are 7 pages of pictures in my demand letter. And before then, the vendor was telling us, we'll pay you $10,000. They saw my demand letter, they let us out of contract. It was bam, 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 bam. You have a history of non-performance. Let me show you exactly how. The other thing that's also interesting is, so we're gonna assume there's an attorney's fees clause. We're gonna assume that there is enough instances that you can beat them over the head, that you can make the argument. It's a pretty high bar, but we're gonna assume you can make it. One of the other things I put this for my own benefit, because this happens in the real world more than you think. It's a security tool. My team is late saying we want to replace them. Guess what I'm asking my team? Do you have a replacement? No, seriously. Business works like this. So I'm pulling my team up. I'm like, okay, so if they stop performing, like if they shut off the device in 10 days, they give us what we want. Do we have a replacement? Have you guys worked on this? And if my team has it, and one of the facts is going to be my team has it, they could actually use my software being up for 3 more months. I'm going to use that as leverage, right? Okay, listen, the contract hasn't even started yet. It's an auto renewal provision. I think they're anti-business anyway. I'm going to take the moral high ground. What the heck? Like, and you're going to get me on an auto renewal provision? Give me a break. Come sue your customer on an auto renewal provision. Go for it. But I'm going to also tell you things. I lost my train of thought. Completely lost it. Where was I?
Auto renewal provision. Very good. Months.
Oh, if I'm Professor Kostrowski's, I'm going to come in and say, you didn't perform, you did all this stuff. And then when the person said, you have to do a buyout, I said, what the heck, I have to do a buyout? You didn't, like, we're in an auto renewal provision. You have to, like, give me a break. And if it keeps going, then I say, okay, what I will get you is 3 more months. You provide the services for 3 more months and we'll do the transition. So these are things you need to think about. Asking questions, pulling in your team, looking at the contract. We just had an instance with an auto renewal where my team came to me within the auto renewal provision. It was 7 days. The auto renewal had already kicked in. They had a 30-day clause. And they said, we don't want to renew. And I was like, what the heck? So I got my team members on the phone. I said, send me the contract. They sent me the contract. I was like, how much do they want? The contract was for a small amount. Let's just say it was $15,000. And they're like, well, next year they want $20,000. I was like, all right. So I went through the contract, because usually contracts, if you know SaaS contracts, you know that some of them have built-in increases, price increases. Some of them do not. So they usually say we can increase the price by X% next year during the renewal period. I went in and I looked at it. It didn't have it. I said, jackpot. All right. So they're trying to increase the price. And then there was even better, there was a provision that said, if we're going to increase the price, we're going to give you 60 days prior notice. We are going to give it to you. I said, all right, we're out. So we went from a situation that I thought was lost. We were just going to have to pay these guys because the contract was so small. It's a small company. We weren't going to make too much of a deal out of it to, oh, all right. Like they had to give us the price increase. They didn't give it to us. So I went to my team, I didn't even involve myself. I said, just go and just say, hey, this new price doesn't work for us, and see if you can get out. That's all that happened. Lawyer didn't have to be involved. They worked it out amongst themselves. We were out of the contract. So they never started a claim. We're good. So think about being practical. How am I going to solve this problem? I feel like being practical has gotten me very far in life, especially being a lawyer. Get out, think about stuff, think about the facts, and see where it can get us. All right. So now we're going to get into a little bit more tactical understanding negotiation scenarios, that type of section of this. Does anybody know what a zero-sum negotiation is? Usually a money negotiation, right? The more I get, the less you get. They're the least fun for me to do because I don't like coming in and just like taking stuff and making you worse off. So, which is why I ground a lot of what I do in facts and reason and research. So there are generally two types of negotiations. The zero sum, the more I get. So if I want to buy that laptop from you, the lower it is, the better I am, the higher it is, the better you are. One person gets the benefit. And then there's the problem-solving negotiations. So when you're entering into a negotiation, try to figure out which type of negotiation am I in. And like I said, I find zero-sum negotiations to be, I don't like them as much because it's one side's just taking and the other side's just giving, and it could turn, if done incorrectly, it could just turn into a battle of who makes themselves look bigger or who wants it more. We're going to talk about later on in the negotiations some tactics for zero-sum negotiations, but just identifying it is really important.
I was curious how, like, between the two, the zero sum and the problem solving, what percentage would you say ends up being a zero sum if it seems so unfair?
For a lawyer, not that much, because we're usually in the clouds being like, hey, your limitation, or we should change this word, we should make it materially accurate as opposed to accurate, right? For a lawyer, not as much. I purposely leave, I gave you some examples where I don't, those are on the rare side. I purposely leave business negotiations to the business team, and I focus on the legal elements of it. And really a contract, legal drafting in a contract is very few times in your life meant to be zero sum, right? There's something you can come into it, and when you're going in, understanding what type of negotiation you have, because then how you treat them will be different. Then there's a series of what's my leverage, right? And sometimes you want to be in your face about what your leverage is, and sometimes you don't. You want to sit back and see how they're taking it. But in that argument, counter arguments, I'm always thinking about what's my leverage, what are their leverages. All right, so an unknown leverage in that scenario that we just did is if they actually shut off the service within 10 days, we're screwed, we don't have a security backup. Chances are, again, if my team was late saying we want them out, they didn't account for them coming in. That's an unknown leverage. I'm not going to make that forward. But you have to sit down and really think about who has the leverage, what's happening, where things are going. The other issue that when you walk into negotiations is like narrowing the issues. You all know about the study that when presented with 12 choices versus 3 choices, people are less likely to buy, was it candy or jams? It was types of jams. If you have 12 choices or 32 choices, people are much less likely to purchase a jar of jam than if you put 3 choices in front of them. So you narrow the issues, right? You don't want the deal to drag out. You figure out what's important to you. The other thing I'm going to tell you is when you're in the business world, people don't care about the law the way we do. They don't care. They want their deal done. So I'm usually embedded with my sales team. They don't care. They don't care that we we got a really good limitation on liability, they care about their commission. You know, so if I bring up too many points, I'm delaying the deal, and I'm making everybody hate me on my side. And that comes down from CEO down. I challenge you all to find a CEO that is so worried about legal issues and how you came out on this materiality clause that they're willing to kill a deal or slow it down months and months. So focus on what's important, narrow your issues down. And then the other thing you need to think about is, do I have a long-term or short-term? I had a situation where someone asked, like, a panhandler that I've given money to before asked me for money again. And then I didn't want to be bothered that night. I was like, hey, I'm sorry, I have to go. And then she started calling me names. She's not getting money from me again, right? So you have to think about the fact that I'm going to have a long-term or short-term relationship with them, and you better be on your best behavior if you're having a long-term relationship with people. And best behavior doesn't mean giving. It means treating people well, treating them with respect. I have had very uncomfortable discussions with people that have been in long-term relationships with us. It's just, you have to think about building a relationship. The other thing I'm going to tell you is, in business, the contract is really the first part of the business relationship. So if the lawyers come in and the lawyers are assholes, my apologies for using the word, you started your business relationship with someone on a left foot. They don't forget. The business people were on the call. This is the start of the relationship, and your lawyers suck. And you've left a bad taste in people's mouths. So think about the relationships, where things are going. Again, there have been times I've gone on very uncomfortable calls, and I purposely made the room uncomfortable, and then I left it dead silent. I then went back and I repaired, right? And I made sure that if I'm going to take this posture, I'm doing it in the right scenario. I did the math in my head. It's the only way I could get what we needed, and I walked back. Sometimes you're sending a message. You want to make people feel uncomfortable, so then they go to the decision makers who are not on the call and say, we're not making progress. The other thing I want to talk about is, are you going to be negotiating with just yourself, multiple lawyers, lawyer and business person? Because a lot of it, I can't tell you how many negotiation points I've won because I've seen that the lawyer and the business people, or the two lawyers, are not on the same page. I sense that. I'm going in. I know I'm winning that point because I'm going to get to the one who's wavering on the point. We're going to win that point. I just know it. So one of the things I do before I get on a call with my business team is I say, hey, I give them the rundown. Hey, let me talk. I like taking control of the negotiation, so let me talk. If it's a business issue, it'll come to you. We're going to have a Slack channel. So if we have a disagreement or you see me going in the wrong direction, I want you to send a Slack message. Don't say it in the group. I say things like, hey, sometimes I create uncomfortable silences. Don't break it. I did it on purpose. The other thing I do is I try to smooth things over with my sales team because I'm helping them and I need them to be on the same page as I do. If someone's inexperienced or I haven't been on a call with them before, I say, listen, like, you might hear me be aggressive on this call, or you might feel like the contract's not going anywhere. Trust me, I've done this so many times. I don't kill deals. Trust me on this. And then one of the things I actually do when I first start working with a salesperson is I get on a call with them afterwards and we debrief. Like, oh, this happened, we make fun of stuff. Like, just trying to form the connection and trust with your salespeople. Because they could kill your deal in a sense of business is always trying to close the deal. Legal is trying to make sure it's a good legal deal. And if business pushes enough, business usually wins, right? So if you want to have power in an organization and if you want to control, if you want to make sure it's well thought out legal document, you need the business team on your side. So you assign roles. If I'm with another lawyer, I assign roles. The other thing I tell the business team is, if you want to say something about what I'm saying, only affirm. Again, if you have a disagreement or I'm going in the wrong direction, correct me, please, Slack message. So you make sure everybody has roles, everybody knows what they're understanding. I tell the business team, is there anything that's really important to you in this deal? When do you need this deal done by? Is there a reason we need to get it done faster or sooner? So you have all these discussions. You're not only negotiating against the other lawyer and the other business team, but you're negotiating with your team to let them, so that you can have the space to provide really good legal outcomes for your company. If you don't do that negotiation, you're not going to be a very effective attorney, in-house at least. And actually, your clients are the same way. Like, you're going to lose clients that way too. Most people who are not sophisticated business people don't have the stomach to sit in deal after deal after deal. And then when they hear disagreement, like, oh my God, I just want this deal done. Just give, can we just give, can we? And it's tough being an attorney. It's lonely being an attorney in-house, because sometimes you're like, just trust me. Let me, and you have to explain to them why. We just had, this happened today. We had one of the very major restaurant chains come and tell us they won't do business with us unless we give them a 50x liability cap. I'm not giving them a 50x liability cap, but I have to sit there, I have to talk through it with my teammate. Hey, how much money are they gonna bring us? Okay, well, that makes that 50x. We don't have a history of giving that. You know, we have companies that give us tens, if not hundreds of millions, and they're all lower. And then I said, okay, so let's work together to try to walk them down the ledge, because our product is really low risk. But you need to have the internal discussions, you need the internal support, and you need the external support. And when you do that, there is a daylight between you and the business, and you can get deals done a lot better. So taking the time, I was telling Professor Kostrisky, I don't get on a call with I don't get on a call if there's multiple people on until I have met with business people. I've figured out exactly what they need, made sure we're all on the same page, and then we get on a call. All right. So as you're doing all this, I put, like most middle-aged people, I own a Peloton. So one of my favorite things that they say is, it's tough. It's supposed to be tough. When you're climbing a hill, it's terrible. It's supposed to be terrible. Your heart rate you're supposed to be uncomfortable. When you're doing negotiations, it's uncomfortable. You're feeling nervous. You have the pressure of the business team or your client that just wants it done. Come on, why are you holding this up? Why are you holding up my deal over material adverse event clause? Like, what are you doing? It's not gonna happen. It's hard. It's meant to be hard. Embrace it. So, even when you're doing collaborative deals, it's hard. And then the other thing that the pressure that you have as a lawyer is the pressure of blowing up the deal, being responsible for blowing up a deal on behalf of your client. That's one of, I work a lot on enterprise deals. Does anybody work on enterprise deals? So enterprise deals are big companies. So normally the deal cycle for an enterprise deal is about 1 to 3 years. So someone before me, the salesperson before me, has worked on this deal for a year, 2 years, 3 years before it comes to me. And their only request of me is, don't blow up my deal, right? So that it's uncomfortable. You have to build the teams. You have to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. The other thing is, everybody wants to be liked. Like, even people who say I don't need to be liked, they like being liked. Everybody likes to be liked. So when you're holding things up, it feels uncomfortable. You have that pressure too, because you just want to end it, get the deal done, get certainty, and move on. But our job as lawyers are to protect the organization. The end of, again, I work at a company, so the end person of like, hey, should we give this really bad point because business wants to close or not is my CEO. At the end of the day, if the CEO wants to make a bad decision, we're going to make that decision together. Let's go. But I almost never let it get to that point. I'm able to control the people, control my team and make sure we're all on the same page. But there's a lot of pressure. Not all deals are meant to close, right? But the other side of that is the other side's under pressure too, right? Sometimes not as much as you, depends what your role are, right? But they're under pressure too. They're also uncomfortable. They also want it done. So sometimes you get to use that to your advantage. Sometimes you slow down the deal. Sometimes you make the negotiations not fun. Sometimes you make them fun. So think about it as you're doing all of this. All right, so now we're gonna get into some of the tips and tricks I use because I'm uncomfortable. And I would also like to not be negotiating. I would like to be sitting on a beach. So what I do is I think about my reasons for negotiating. So for my company, it's really important for me to protect my company. We want to go public. I want to have good contracts. I've been an M&A attorney on the other side. I've ripped contracts apart. I've found issues with people. I want to have a clean books when we go public. I want to do what's in the best interest of the company. Sometimes, especially for women, it's hard to negotiate things on your behalf. So I have a trick for that too. I don't like it either. I'm actually way better at negotiating things on other people's behalf than I am on my own. But my trick is I'm doing it for my kids. The take, if I'm doing a zero-sum negotiation, I don't like it, but the take is for my kids. So think about what your anchors are. And then just do what works for you. Whether that is pretending to negotiate on someone else's behalf or just recognizing it's okay to sit there in discomfort. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that way. So then I want to talk about one other thing before we go into the really tactical elements of this presentation, which is as you're doing all this, another anchor is professionalism, right? As lawyers, we have a duty to be professional to each other. It's really important. I could see why that's there. There are times that I'm tempted to just call the other attorney something because they're being really special. But we have a duty of professionalism. We have a duty against making false statements, right? So remember that. You're no one's hired gun. You're not there to land yourself in a lawsuit. You're not there to make fraudulent statements. It's a business deal. We're all in business class. No one's dying. We're making rich people richer, right? And if we fail, we'll make them slightly less rich. It's okay. You're no one's hired gun. Stick to your core values of I'm going to be professional and I'm going to not do things that I'm uncomfortable with. The other thing that I do is I don't say things that I don't mean. This has saved me so many times because people know me. People know that if I come back and I'm sorry, I screwed up. My company wants this. They can trust the fact that I'm not lying to them. I have established credibility with them, and I use it to my advantage when I can because I call it out, I apologize, and I'm like, hey, I have to go in another direction because of X, Y, and Z. I'm sorry, I know I gave on this, but I ran it and I screwed up. Can you help me? If you promise something, keep it. The number one complaint about lawyers is they don't do things in a timely manner. So I have a question for all of you. If I just leave the room and I don't come back in 10 minutes, you're gonna be wondering what the hell just happened, right? You're uncomfortable, you're going back and forth. If I say, I'm sorry, I have to take this isn't the nicest thing to do, but I have to take a really important call, it's an emergency. I'll be back in 10 minutes, and I come back in 10 minutes, real happy. You weren't anxious, you weren't sitting there figuring out. So one of the things I do is I always work off of timelines, and then I meet them, or if I don't, I send an email. So people are nervous when they're negotiating. When I promise something, I send it, I do it timely. And I do things like, again, I'm trying to build credibility. As promised, here's the report. We'll get this to you by Sunday. Come Sunday, or actually, I don't work on weekends anymore. Come Monday. Bad example. Come Monday, I'll send this to you. As promised, Monday, here's this document. Monday comes, I can't meet it. I'm sorry, I know I said Monday. We had some things on our end. We'll have it for you by Wednesday. Keep that word. Whatever time you give people, under promise, over deliver. Because You're building trust. Every time you break trust, it's a detriment to you. And then the other, we already talked about this, is again, you're no one's hired gun. In all of this, there's a legal ethics rule about zealous advocacy. But if you burn all your bridges with one client, you still keep going, you're screwing over your other clients, right? So you have to do what's in your client's best interest, but be reasonable. There are multiple ways of doing this. All right. So we're going to talk about, do we want to take a 5-minute break before we get into tactics? Why don't we take just 5 minutes and then we'll come back. We're actually right on time for the presentation. So it's a 2-hour class, so I think people can use some time. Let's be back here at 5:50.
And I have all these notes from
Since we're on break, could I ask something? Is there a sign up for this
I see you now. I can't see.
Oh. What's your name again? I'm sorry.
Oh, but
Vic?
yeah.
Oh, come over here. Yeah, well, you guys are probably gonna see it.
Seriously.
Okay.
They're doing so many.
What's your favorite topic? No, it's
There we are.
oh,
Oh, of course, I didn't.
so I'm doing.
That's an interesting book because, you know, I've always held it. I think everything I do.
What is it called?
Yeah.
Decentralized autonomous organization. So basically, like Bitcoin, like no one owns Bitcoin that exists as like a chain
Here you
organization.
go.
Yeah. No. I was going to point out, excuse me, you guys have ants up here.
What?
You have ants.
I know, I'm going to address that tomorrow at the administration.
Okay.
I decided I'm doing basically like how.
All right, should we get back to it?
Yes.
So, this section of the presentation, we're going to talk about presence, establishing your presence, and some techniques that you should think about when you're walking into a room or a Zoom call or whatever. One of the things I do, and if there's multiple people, I decide how much space I'm going to take. Am I going to lead it? Am I going to sit back? Are we on a call because I'm returning red lines or they're returning red lines? Sometimes I purposely want them to take the lead. Or if they have questions, I want them to take the lead. Other times, I tend to like to be in control of the discussion, so I like to take it. So there's actually really fun research on, like, you know how when you do group projects, someone usually ends up leading it, or if you're on a call, someone usually ends up leading it. It's usually the person that just speaks first. So if you want to take it, be the first person to speak business, or when someone starts talking business, be the one that then responds and then takes it. You don't have to actually arm wrestle to figure out who takes control, but it's a really fun piece of research. It's just the person that talks first usually ends up kind of taking control of it. One of the other things is how you introduce yourself is really important. Actually, one of the reasons I wanted to give this presentation is that one of the books I was reading, white, older male, he talked about how he made himself really small. If I make myself too small, I'm getting people coffee. So I have to walk a line, right? There are times where I'll get on a call and I don't want my title out there. So I just say, and I think I love introducing myself this way. It's, usually with business folks on, I say, I'm just a lawyer. I just sit back. There are other times I get on and say, I'm Deputy General Counsel at Upside. And then something will happen, and I'll be like, yeah, I'm in charge of this. What do you need me to do? It depends on the situation. But think about that. Do you want to make yourself approachable? Because that's what's going to give, that's the kind of call you want to lead? Or do you want to take charge because you're upset about something? Or because you feel like you need to? Or because they're formal? Sometimes, when the other lawyer is really formal and there's business people on, I purposely do that. I'm just a lawyer. Because you can look me up. You can see that I usually had the higher title or whatever. You can look me up. I'm going to assume you have. And it just makes me sound a little bit more, oh, this person's here to solve problems and get things done. Look, they're not being a typical lawyer. So think about it. These small things, how you set the tone, how much space you take, make a difference. I also like to set the tone of, I'm just here to get to the right answer, kind of. So I did a negotiation for one of my best friends. We've known each other for over 8 years. She's never heard me negotiate before. And she was recalling the negotiation back to me. And she said, it's like you told them their contract was a pile of crap. And they agreed with you. I was like, oh yeah. And she said, you just made the statement in such a non-judgmental way. And what had happened is they were hiring my friend as an independent, it was the company that had, that she worked for before. They were hiring her as an independent contractor. The intellectual property provision when you have an employee is you take all the intellectual property you possibly can. But when an independent contractor works for you on a part-time basis, you really if the independent you're only licensed that information, or if something's being specifically built to you, you only own that. So I told them, I was like, hey, this contract doesn't look like the right contract. You're taking all the IP. And the guy, to his credit, looked at it and he's like, yeah, this is the smash and grab like IP version, isn't it? I was like, yeah. He's like, I'll fix it. So my friend is laughing her butt off because she was tired of working for the company. Now she's coming back and she's like, I just won this major point. But to her it was, I called it a piece of crap. They agreed. We fixed it. We moved on. But that's how I like to do things. Like, I like being a little bit academic. I like saying things like, oh, well, I could see why you want that provision, but really it doesn't work in a SaaS agreement because, and I go and I explain it, right? Facts, reason, that's where I'm most comfortable, logic. The other part of it is, when you're setting the tone, my tone is going to be really different if I'm speaking directly to another lawyer or if I'm making the business, again, I'm arguing with business people. So I try to figure out who's the decision maker. Like I said, I hate to break it to y'all, it's rarely the lawyer. Right, we all have clients that we're doing things on our clients' behalf. And I try to figure out who it is and I play to them. I slow things down, I say things, I structure things in a lot of fairness if it's business people. Hey, but that wouldn't be fair if we did that because X, Y, and Z can happen and then that would leave us hanging, right? So figure out who it, I wouldn't necessarily talk like that if it's another lawyer, especially if it's, but to business people, I speak a different way. The other thing is, I like to build trust by calling out the elephant in the room. So when you negotiate contracts, especially business contracts, the fun begins, you can go through the entire contract. The fun begins when you go to the indemnification and limitation of liability section. That's where all the fighting is. So one of the things I do is I'll be like, hey, now glad we got through that, now we're on to the fun part of the contract. So I've now, again, calmed the situation down. Business people are thinking, okay, this lawyer is like, not like your typical lawyer, is just trying to get stuff done. I call out emotions, like, hey, I see that you feel a little uncomfortable. Tell me why. Or, this may seem like unreasonable, I could see how you can think that, but let me explain why it's not. So if someone's squirming in their seat, if they're not unhappy, you call it out. Hey, like, what's going on? Like, I've done this multiple times in a call. I see that you're not happy with this. Tell me what's up. Tell me what you're thinking. And then when I'm doing hard negotiations, because I can be very direct, I'll say things like, I know this is not what you want to hear, but we're just not going to keep buying services from you if you're not going to deliver. You know, you frame where you're going. I'm sorry, but I'm going to be very direct. One of my biggest wins in negotiating is we were negotiating against a $100 billion company. When we had first started, we had given them the world, and I had to go claw it back. And we had to continually think about when you're going to one of the biggest, most risk-averse companies in the world, and you're saying, we gave you unlimited liability, we need to claw it back. That's not a fun place to be. Well, it's a fun place to be if you're me, because I enjoy this stuff. And we went back and forth, and they kind of said they were going to give it, then they said they weren't, and then they came back with a draft that was crap. It made it look like they gave it, but they really didn't. So I started the conversation, very sober. I said, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be very direct here. This isn't what we agreed to. This is putting us in the same place as before, and we're just not going to move forward if this is going to be the same. So, and you have the uncomfortable discussion, right? And then the cool thing is you can always pull back from being uncomfortable. So you have it, but you call it like to tell people when I'm angry at them. I like to let them know because I think it adds an extra effect. The other thing is if you have good news or bad news, I frame it to, hey, I have some bad news. I have some good. So if you are acknowledging how they will feel about something, you've gained credibility, you've gained trust, and you're more in it together instead of you just waving your finger at them. Hey, I have bad news. I ran this up. I tried. I couldn't get this. So you're acknowledging how they're feeling about it. The other presence tactic is framing the argument. Okay, so you ask for a raise. So your boss is thinking, so you want more money for the same work. That's cool, right? How would you frame it otherwise? From your end, you just want fair compensation. So if you frame it as fair compensation in line with what the market is, that's a very different discussion of give me more money for the same work. That's part of why doing research, arguments, counter arguments are really important. Yes?
Not only that, but I'm a lot better at what I do because I've gained some valuable experience.
Yeah. Yes. That is facts, reason, framing the argument. Another way to frame it is benefits versus cost, right? You did that. It's not how much you're paying for the settlement, but look, here's the benefit you're getting. You are going to be helping these families. Another way of looking at it is loss versus gain. Part of the reason people don't buy, I'm a corporate transactional attorney. Part of the reason people don't buy our services but then throw money at litigators is because if you go and say, come buy my services, I will prevent problems for you. That doesn't sound as good as let me go kick the door to your problem right now, right? So think about how you're framing what's happening. And the other thing about framing is you don't need to fight the fight that someone's creating for you there. You can change it. You can see that, for example, the negotiation started in the indemnification clause. They're really mad at me. Hey, oh yeah, I see that. Why don't we start and go in order? So then you go in order and you build, like, I'll do that on purpose sometimes. Someone will be like, I see that they're getting hot, I might change direction. So think about it, frame your argument, have your battles where you want to have them. And then you get to the indemnification. Hopefully by that point you've given, I have another slide on give and take, and you've given gracefully, you've built some capital with them. And you can hopefully negotiate that provision better without hot tempers. Another thing that I do, and unfortunately I have to do this more than I like, is being a referee in terms of calling out bad behavior and labeling good behavior. I have gone on calls where the second I say hi, the other attorney starts yelling at me. It has happened, thankfully not that often. It's like, hi, how are you doing? Why are you defrauding us? Oh, well, nice to meet you too. So one of the things I do, especially if there's an audience, is I label it. You can take what you want from this, but there's been multiple times in my career that I have called older gentlemen emotional during an negotiation. I've done it on purpose because they have come in yelling. And I let them yell, and then I say something like, listen, we don't have to be so emotional. And I've done it on purpose. I've done it to embarrass them because that is not how I want to do business. And I do it only when I have an audience. And the last time I did it, the gentleman realized, the lawyer realized what I was doing, chuckled to himself, and then he was on his best behavior the rest of the call. I don't recommend doing it to everybody. I could get away with some stuff that some of you might not, and you can get away with stuff that I can. But for me, it's worked when I've done it. And it's usually when someone has come in unreasonably hot and I want to call it out. And I'll say, and then when I don't want to be that mean, I'll say things like, this is a business deal. Like, we don't have to be so, like, if you don't want to do business with us, it's fine. This is a business deal. Can we bring down the temperature? I call it out. Hey, this is getting aggressive. I'm okay calling it out. I could get away, like, I've done it throughout my career. I've tested it. It works for me. We're getting repetitive here. I was on a call with the general counsel of this major company. It was 2 lawyers versus 1. So it's not fun when it's 2 versus 1. We had overcharged him for one thing. He was so mad. So he said, "You've overcharged me. I can't believe this." I said, "Okay, you're right. It's yours." And then he did it again. And then he did it again. And I said, "I've already given it to you 4 times. Do you want me to give it to you again 5th time, or do you want to move on to the next point?" And until I made that kind of jabby comment, he was just coming at me, right? So sometimes I feel like I need to reset the conversation and take control, and that's how I do it. I make jabby comments. That might not be your thing. It's perfectly okay. But for me, when things get aggressive, when I feel like I just don't want to have this conversation this way, I call it out. And then on the, if I want to be more polite about it, I'll be like, "We're not being very collaborative." I had this one attorney who essentially, like, in the recitals, he was already fighting. He was fighting every single thing you can possibly fight. I said, "Listen, we're not being very collaborative. We're not going to get it very far if this is the position you're going to take. Do you want to continue this call and send me an issues list, or do you think we can continue this call more collaboratively?" Now, all these positions I'm taking are really tough. Like, it may sound fun that I called someone in, but I'm doing it under the risk of blowing up the deal. So I'm careful about when I do it, because again, you don't want to blow up the deal. But I have found that if I don't take control when someone's behaving badly, the deal takes longer to close. And all I care about is closing the deal as fast as I can to the benefit of my client. So think about what works. Sometimes you need to sit there and get yelled at. It's okay. But I hope you, as the world gets kinder and gentler, I've seen my daughters in high school, they're so much kinder and gentler than we were in the 90s. I hope you see less and less of that. I saw a lot more of it earlier in my career, and thankfully I'm seeing less and less of it. But then I also call out good behavior. "Oh, we were able to reach a resolution that worked for both of us there." Or, "Thanks for working for us. Oh, that's a good solution. Yeah, we'll do that." So I try to encourage good behavior and kind of slap away bad behavior. You don't have to, but that's what works for me. And then you have to think about, I'm going to twist it one other way too. There's a huge difference between how you say it. "Oh, that's aggressive. I've judged it. That feels aggressive. That's coming on me. It's what I'm saying." Or, "That sounds aggressive." So I actually use the last one more because it's a little bit gentler. I'm like, "Oh, that sounds weird," or that sounds like you're trying to do this. Think about how you say it. Words are really important. The other thing is, going from calling out stuff, is I love silence. You had mentioned silence. I love when someone is asking you to do something unreasonable or you're stuck. Silence is a great way to get past it. So sometimes I'll say things like, how do you expect us to do that? Stop. Don't let anybody break your silence. That's why I have to talk. You put the onus on the other person. You stop talking. Or, "I don't think I can sell this internally. I've made my statement. Stop." People are problem solvers. They'll propose something. If they don't, you're in the same place you would have been anyway. Or they're asking you to take a hard position. Stop that. See if they solve the problem for you. I think 8 out of 10 times someone will be like, "Oh, well, we can split it this way." And now you're working with them. You're back in business. The other thing that I have found really important, and it's a good lesson that I've learned, is sometimes it's really helpful to slow things down, especially if you are arguing with each other. If attorneys sometimes get into email battles, if someone's hot, responding right away, you've made it hot again, right? Then they respond right away. Then you respond right away. Slow down. You don't need to respond right when you get an email, right? Or, I'm dealing with a vendor. They're not giving out a point. I know they need to get the deal done at the end of the month. At first, I was really quick in responding. Now I'm taking 2 weeks. So if they want to keep raising points, that's cool. It'll take them another 2 weeks. Use it to your advantage. Time it is your advantage, and sometimes it's to your disadvantage. When you're on the other side, you need to close the deal, so you've got to put it in. But when you know you have it as a leverage, use it. I've had many times when the vendors are not giving it a point, I think they're being unreasonable. Instead of returning the contract 2 days later, which is what I normally do, or 3 days later, now they get it back in 2 weeks. And then they get the point. Like, oh, if I raise another issue, she's gonna take another 2 weeks, right? Or again, when things are angry, don't respond. You don't have to respond to angry emails. You can take your time, control what you can. All right, give and take tactics. So when I give, there's 2 tactics I usually take. I either give and I give gracefully. I always say if you're gonna give gracefully, give it with a smile. Make people feel good. And take credit for it. Oh yeah, we can get that point. One of my favorite things I say during negotiations, and it usually makes people laugh, and the business team is listening, is I'm not gonna die on this hill. Makes me sound reasonable. But it also makes it seem like there's hills I'm gonna die on. And there are hills I will die on. It's limitation of liability, it's indemnification. I'm not dying on this one. So then when I'm signaling, there are things that are really important for me. This one I'm choosing to give. Make a good point. Give the point. Move on. Sometimes though, I purposely want the other side to know that I'm gonna make it hard for them. So I'm gonna pull, not quite as badly as that one lawyer did to me, but early on, a point that I know I'm gonna give eventually, I'm gonna make them work for it. I'm gonna make them provide me the reasons. I'm gonna make them go through it. I'm gonna give them the counter arguments because I want them to know that this is how hard it was for you to get this point. Now wait till we get to the important stuff. So be tactical about it, right? Be curious, ask for explanations. This is one of my favorite things that I do that I'm kind of surprised not enough people do it. Someone will say, well, we can't accept a limitation on liability of $5 million. Well, why? Like, what do you think is the risk that would warrant a $5 billion liability risk? And I know what the market is. I know it's not $5 million. So I ask the question. And then when they tell me, oh, we're worried about personally identifiable information, I said, well, our product, everything you send us is anonymized. So you don't need to be at $5 million, right? I asked the question, I got them to answer it, and then I alleviated it. Sometimes when someone's uncomfortable too, again, ask them, what's going on? When you ask why someone can't give on a provision, you can figure out a compromise usually. Someone will say, well, we can't give on this point because we have this regulatory burden. So if the regulators come after us, we need the liability cap to be 10 million. Oh, cool, okay, I have a solution. We'll do $1 million for everything else, but if you have a regulatory issue come up, that's gonna be 10 million. I've now carved it. We both have what we need, we move on. Instead of making it 10 million for everybody. Does that make sense? Like, find, slice, dice, move on, right? And you can only do that if you're asking questions. Be creative, right? So when you're negotiating with Professor K and I, you can be like, hey, I need 3 months. Or like, hey, I could give you a good review if you fix X, Y, and Z for me. Think about other things that you can add to a deal. Think about the side things, like, hey, you're buying a car, we negotiated the price down $10,000, but like, oh, you can't go to 10,000, you can only go to 8. Okay, can you throw in a roof rack? Can you throw in this? Think about things that could get everybody to what they need, but don't be too creative. Adding too many options and adding too many issues will make your deal suffer. It'll slow things down. So offer compromises, right? When you figure out what the issue is that's slowing things down, just really think about it. Most of the time when people explain to me what their problem is, I am able to find a solution that works without being too creative, without introducing too many variables. We joke at my company that we know when our CEO negotiated a deal. It's so stupidly complicated. It goes all over the place. I never do that. I pull it back. I try to stay clean. I try to get to the end of the deal as fast as I can without introducing too many variables. Let's say I want to cut in line with, if I come up to you and I say, can I cut in line? There's a printer, you're waiting to print stuff. Can I cut in line in front of you? You're going to be like, what the heck? Go to the end of the line. What if I say, can I cut in line because I'm running late for a presentation that I'm giving? Are you going to let me in front of you? Chances are, yeah, right? Explanation is the most effective tool that you have because it's the most effective negotiation tool. Hey, I want $10,000 for this, not because I just want $10,000, but because it costs me a lot of business to put it together. We have proprietary information, and it's going to make you money, right? Limitation of liability. It's not, I want that lower limitation of liability. Let me tell you why. Our product is really very low risk. You're not putting in any personal identifiable information into it. The consumer is interacting with our app. Because it's the most effective thing that you can do, and it's why you should sit there and think about the arguments and the counter arguments before going in. Zero-sum negotiations. Again, is it much nicer to say I want $1,200, or is it, well, I want $1,200 as opposed to $1,000 because my computer is in really good shape, right? It works really well. I've always taken good care of it. That makes the negotiation so much better, right? You're not fighting over wills. You're fighting over facts. You're fighting over reason. The other thing you can use explanation for is, and I use this a lot actually, like this point is really important to us as a company because I'm signaling to the other side I'm not going to get that much on this point. So just use it whenever you can. You're going to have much better outcomes because again, you're not fighting theoretically, you're fighting practically. And one of the things a lot of lawyers do is they love fighting about black rule law. No one wants to hear that. Everybody in the, but I do sometimes explain black rule law. I'll say, this happens a lot in NDAs. There's been a court case that says if the definition of confidentiality is too broad in an NDA, it's unenforceable. So I mark up NDAs and I limit what the definition of confidentiality is. Not too much, but I put parameters around it. And lawyers come back and they're like, well, it's an NDA, we've always used this. I say, well, no, it needs to be this because there's been a court case in Pennsylvania, you all can look it up, that said that NDA with a confidentiality provision that is too broad is unenforceable, and I want all the information protected, including your information. Use it, right? When you explain it that way, you can have your black law letter arguments, but don't get too much like that in front of the business team. And then the other thing is give yourself an out. I actually almost never say I said sometimes I'll say I'm in charge. I almost never say I'm actually the ultimate decision maker in the legal stuff because I want an out. If things are not going where I want it to be, if the conversation's getting rough, I just want to be like, okay, we'll run that internally and we'll get back to you. I don't advertise that the decision is mine. Find a way, to get out. You need to sometimes find a way to get out of it, to go back, slow things down, or actually just figure out what the right answer is. So take a break, feel free to take things back, give yourself an out when you need it. And if you're uncomfortable, slow things down, you can end the discussion, you can pick it back up. All right, we have 10 minutes. minutes left, so I gotta hurry a little bit through this so we can do the M exercise. This is execution tactics. So when you're getting to the actual nitty gritty, have anybody heard of the Ackerman method of negotiation? So the Ackerman method of negotiation says you start with a number that's 65% of what you're willing to give. So if I'm willing to give $100, I'm going to come at you and say, I'll pay $65. This works in zero-sum negotiations. Then your next leap is 85%. So the person says no. You're like, okay, I'll give you 85. And then the next time they say no, you go to 95. And the rule of it is you start small, and as the person says no, the amounts you're willing to jump get smaller and smaller. And then once you get to about 95% of your give, you say, then you can go to your target, which if your target was $100, and then you say, oh, and I'll give you the shirt off my back, or I'll do something nice for you. I'll throw in this, right? I'll throw in, you're buying a car, I'll throw in a good review, right? Whatever. I like to do a different type of Ackerman method when I'm doing deals, which is, oh, by the way, your target number in the Ackerman method is an exact number. So before you started out with like 65, 85, 95, and then when you get to your target number, you're like, it's $101.02. And then like, you know, the people who teach us, you act like you're really adding things up and like that number is really special. So I like to do it a different way because I think this helps me get to the point I want to get to better. Is I start with a very exact number. So I say, okay, we can settle this for $225,000. And then I tell a story. I provide an explanation of why. $225,000 because we looked at the market, we saw that the competitors were doing this, and yours doesn't have this feature that we really want, whatever the story is. I attach a story. Or we looked at what you did, the services you provided us, this is the 3 places you fell short, it adds up to $225.50. So when you start with that, and by the way, I'm not being so, like sometimes like I want the number to be around 225, and then I find a story around it, right? But telling a story, facts, explaining why, allows you to level set. So then, if you want to go off my number, that's 225, you sound like a jerk unless you have an explanation, right? So instead of the Ackerman method where you've thrown out 65%, the person says no, and you just kind of move up, you tell me why. Here's the 3 services you didn't deliver. Tell me why I should pay for them. Tell me why I should pay more. That's how I like to negotiate, and I like to keep things exact. When I'm giving on like a limitation liability clause, I'm usually an exact number because I have a formula. I took 3x, 3 times whatever we think their spend will be. I normally start at 80% and then I set 2 more increases. But what I have done when I go into a negotiation is I remember doing this in law school. I develop the number I want, my target, and then I develop numbers around it. The absolute minimum I'm willing to get, and I make sure I'm on the same page on my client with it. The middle number we're willing to get, and then the really good outcome. And then I start with the really good outcome, exact number, explanation why we should get that really good outcome. All right. Have you guys heard of nibble negotiations? So nibble negotiations are when you're negotiating with someone, and it's so effective, and I hate when people do it to me. I try not to do it to other people because I don't. It's when you negotiate a point and then someone keeps adding stuff, right? They're nibbling. So you negotiate the price of the car. Oh, and could I have a maintenance plan? Well, we just negotiated the price of the car. Oh, and can we, like the taxes, shouldn't that be included in the price we negotiated? So they're nibbling. So one of the things I do is I'm usually the vendor. If someone's nibbling, we're gonna give, right? So I try to do things to prevent nibble negotiation. Like, hey, is this all of your edits? I want all of the edits all at the same time. And I train my sales team. I'm like, no, we're not gonna sit there and negotiate parts. They need to go mark everything up, give us everything at the same time. We're gonna negotiate a holistic deal. And I call it out. It's like if we're settling something, it's like everything's holistic. This is the final number. And I set the example because I don't want nibbling. The other thing is, this is like, people say, what can I do as a young associate? Plenty. One of the best things you can do is make it really easy for people to take your position, right? So if you want someone to take your position, have the document ready to go. Oh, here, I already drafted this provision. You want to use my language? Most people are lazy. They're going to say yes, right? I love having the pen because I'm going to write it in a way that's most beneficial for me. Even if it doesn't look like it, it's written in a way that's most beneficial for me. Make it easy for people to take your position. Do the hard work. I'll send for signature. I'll draft that for you. I'll take care of the logistics. Make it easy. And then the other thing that we talked about is creating complexity. Stay away from it because time kills all deals. Salespeople say it's true. Time kills all deals. Do it fast. Set timelines. Talk about, I'll get this back to you on Wednesday. When do we expect this deal to be done? Okay, Wednesday, and then when can we expect your draft? If I get this to you on Wednesday, when can we expect a draft back from you? All right. This one we're gonna go kind of fast through it. One of the cool things that you learn as you do this against the same people multiple times is people are patterns. So if someone did something one way last time, they're gonna do it again. So think about who you're going against. If they waited until the last second that time, cool, prepare for it. If they did nibble negotiations last time, prepare for it. Also, another thing to note is if someone's a jerk during negotiations, remember I told you contract is the first phase of dealing with them? Chances are they're going to be a jerk every time you deal with them. Do you want to do business with them? In my years when I had my own practice, I had 2 people mark up my engagement letters. Both of them were pains in the ass. So think about it. Do you want them as your client? Do you want to be doing this deal with them? If they're being unethical, you need to sometimes pull your team back and be like, I'm not sure we want this. 5% of customers account for 95% of the issues you will ever have. People love being heard. So try to understand the core of their arguments, repeat it back to them. Okay, so what I hear you saying is you're worried about the regulatory risks. Is that correct? Okay, let me mitigate that for you. This is part of the reason I say be yourself, build trust, because people will talk to you more. People want to be understood. And again, there's research out there, we talked about this, that talks about people who listen better are better negotiators on average. There is a role of gender in negotiations. I don't have a ton of time to going into this, but when I initially prepped this presentation, it was actually for our women's group at work. Taking control is different. You have to take it different ways. If you're a man and you come in and you're too aggressive, you're going to be off-putting to the women. If you're a woman and you come in too aggressive, you might be perceived as a different way. If you're a woman and you don't come in and take space, you might be looked over. If you're a man and you come in and take too much space, it might be uncomfortable, or too little space. So you have to think about it. We're all in a room together, and just one of the things I constantly do at work is sometimes, and it builds me a lot of brownie points, sometimes we're negotiating and someone's not heard, and I just repeat back, wait, so-and-so had a good point. Let me just say it again and bring it back, because that person feeling heard is now on their side. We talked about how negotiations are the first step in partnerships. All right, we're not gonna have time to do this. But I think it's fun. Now that you've had the chance to go through the facts, think about how differently these negotiations would turn out. Like, I'm a jerk. So if someone hasn't started the contract yet, I'm gonna be like, listen, you're not getting me an auto renewal terms, right? But if I know there's an attorney's fees position, I'm gonna be less of a jerk, right? Because I could get sued, and not only am I paying the $500,000, but I'm also paying their attorney's fees. But one of the points to this is also think about how you would write your contract. If I'm the vendor, I almost always have attorney's fees provisions in my contract. I'm always trying to create leverage, right? If I am buying services, I have a rule that I've implemented in my company, which is you need to put these reps and warranties into the contract. There's the performance rep and warranty that will perform in accordance with the document because it builds me leverage. So one of the cool things about negotiating is it's going to make you better draft contracts. So as you're reading contracts, think about how you can create leverage for your team. So then when you're sitting there negotiating, you've created leverage or you've taken away leverage. In vendor contracts, I take away the attorney's fees. I don't want to be in this position. I don't want to be a jerk, right? And I also don't allow auto renewal provisions, by the way, in all our agreements. That's another rule I've implemented. Take them away. They should not be in your agreement, unless you're accepting my agreement, in which case there's not a renewal clause. So some takeaways: prepare, build trust, use curiosity to identify issues, and explain your point of view. And my closing invitation to all of you is bring respect, professionalism, and integrity in everything you do. It will pay back dividends. Practice, brainstorm this stuff. At first it's uncomfortable, just like anything. Next time you do it, it's less uncomfortable. Next time it's even less uncomfortable. So practice, work on it. Do A/B testing. Sometimes I just randomly try one thing on a provision that doesn't matter and see how the room read it, and then I'll try another thing. Try it, prepared. The most prepared person in the room usually wins. Prepare. And be open and curious and trust your instincts. All right, we are done.
Okay, thank you for Now, for those of you who have a CLE form, you must deliver it to me.